Ferdinand de Beaumont was an archaeologist as ambitious as Schillmann. He tried to find the traces of the legendary city called Labtit by the Arabs, and which was supposed to have been their capital in Spain. Nobody disputed the existence of such a city, but most specialists, be they Arabists or Hispanists, agreed that it would be identified either as Ceuta on the African territory opposite Gibraltar, or as Jaén in Andalusia at the foot of the Sierra Magdalena. Beaumont wouldn't agree to these identifications on the grounds that none of the excavations made at the Ceuta and Jaén had displayed some of the features attributed to Labtit by the literature. Stories told in particular of a strong castle with feared leafed gates meant neither for going in nor for going out, but only to be kept locked. Whenever a king died or another took the high throne after him, he set with his own hands a new lock at the gate, until these locks numbered 24, one for each of the kings. There were 7 round rooms in the castle. The 7th was, quote, so long that the ablest archer shooting from the threshold could nor get his arrow to fix in the end wall, unquote. In the first, there were perfect figures, representing Arabs mounted on their swift horses and camels, with turbans hanging down their shoulders and scimitars dangling from their belts and bearing long lances in their right hands. Beaumont belonged to that school of medievalists, which described itself as materialist, and which prompted a professor of the history of religion, for example, to go through the accounts of the Vatican chancery with the sole aim of proving that in the first half of the 12th century, the consumption of parchment, lead, and singularly ribbon so far exceeded the amount justified by the number officially declared and registered bulls that even allowing for the possible meltings and probable muddles, one had to conclude that a relatively large number of bulls, and we are talking about bulls, not briefs, since only bulls were sealed with lead, briefs being sealed with wax, had been kept confidential, if not clandestine. Once the thesis, justly famous in its time, on secret bulls and the question of the antipopes, which shed new light on the relations between Innocent II, Ankelite II, and Victor IV. In a roughly similar manner, Beaumont showed that if you took as a yardstick not Sultan Selim's 1798 world record of 888 meters, but the good, though not outstanding, performance of the English bowman in Crécy, the 7th room in the castle at Labtit could not have been less than 200 yards long, and, taking account of the angle of projection, could scarcely have been less than a 30-yard ceiling height. Neither the excavations at Ceuta, nor those at Jaén, nor any of the others had uncovered a room of the requisite dimensions, which allowed Beaumont to state that, if the legend of this city has its origins in some real fortress, then it is not any of those whose remains we know of to date. Beyond this purely negative argument, another fragment of the legend of Labtit seems destined to give Beaumont a hint of the citadel's site. On the unreachable end wall of the archer's room, so the legend went, the following sentence was carved: If ever a king opens the door of this castle, his warriors will turn to stone like the warriors of the first room, and his enemies shall lay his kingdom to waste. Beaumont saw this metaphor as a translation of the upheavals which shook the Reyes de Taiafas and provoked the Reconquista. More exactly, in his view, the legend of Labtit described what he called the Cantabrian debacle of the Moors. That is to say, the Battle of Covadonga, in the course of which Pelage defeated the emir Alakma before having himself crowned the king of Asturias on the battlefield. And with an enthusiasm that brought him the admiration of even his sharpest critics, Ferdinand de Beaumont decided that it was Oviedo, in the heart of Asturias, where the remains of the legendary fortress were to be found. The origins of Oviedo were obscure. Some believed it was a monastery built by 2 monks to escape from the Moors. Others saw it as a Visigoth citadel. Still others held it to be a Hispano-Roman oppidum, sometimes called Lucus Asturum, sometimes Ovedum. And finally, there were those who said it was a Pelage himself, called Don Pelayo by the Spaniards, who believed him to be King Rodriguez's old lance-bearer at Jerez, and Belai al-Royam by the Arabs, since he was supposed to be of Roman extraction, who had founded the city. So many contradictory hypotheses served to support Beaumont's argument. He took Oviedo to the fabled Labtite, then the most northerly of the Moorish strongholds in Spain, and by that token, the symbol of their domination over the peninsula. Its loss would have signaled the end of Islamic hegemony over the Western Europe, and it would have been to assert this defeat that the victorious Pelage settled there. Excavations began in 1930 and lasted more than 5 years. In the final year, Beaumont was visited by Bartelbooth, who had come to nearby Gijon, also an ancient capital of the Asturian kings, to paint the first of his seascapes. A few months later, Beaumont returned to France. He drew up a 78-page technical report on the conduct of the excavations, in which, in particular, he proposed a system for exploiting the results based on the Dewey Decimal Classification, and which is still regarded as a model of its kind. Then, on 12th November 1935, something happened. He committed suicide. Yes, just like that.